Hello, everyone. I'm Supreet Kaur Saluja, the Chief Strategic Partnerships and New Ventures Officer at Girl Scouts of the USA. And I'm so excited to present to you our Campfire Chat, Female-Founded Startups, the Women Investing in Our Future. Before I introduce our guest speakers, I'd love to tell you about the Girl Scout Network. We're a community of adults, Girl Scout alums, and supporters from across the country who feel passionately about supporting girls and one another. If you're reconnecting with us now, welcome back to the Girl Scout Sisterhood. During our Campfire Chat, successful women, many of them alum, share their stories to both educate and inspire us. We'd also like to extend a special welcome to the current Girl Scout ambassadors and seniors in the audience. We can't wait to welcome you into the Girl Scout Network when you graduate the program and become alums. You'll see that we'll be sharing information about our entrepreneurship badges in the chat log. Last summer, Girl Scouts of the USA released new entrepreneurship badges, which are designed to help girls develop an entrepreneurial mindset as they create and pitch products and services, build business plans, and think about production and marketing. Some of the badges even feature Girl Scout alum from last year's Campfire Chat on entrepreneurship, including Sally Crouchow of Elevest and Britt Morin from Brit & Co. Research shows that girls are actively interested in becoming entrepreneurs, but there are stumbling blocks on a girl's path to entrepreneurship. They include fear of failure, concerns about bringing her ideas to life, and the perception that men are more likely to be entrepreneurs than women. While entrepreneurship may not be the right fit for every girl, we here at Girl Scouts believe that every girl will benefit and maybe even discover a future career path by learning to think like an entrepreneur. One more thing before we get started. We'll be moderating the chat log and sharing your questions with the panelists, so don't be afraid to ask away. And if you're inclined to share what you've learned, please tag your social posts with the hashtag Campfire Chats and @GirlScouts. Now I'd like to introduce you to Wendy Diamond, CEO and founder of the Women's Entrepreneurship Day organization. It's a non-governmental philanthropic volunteer organization with chapters in 144 countries and 112 universities. Their global mission is to empower women in business, and they host an annual summit of women entrepreneurs. Wendy, thanks so much for joining us. Turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Supreet. This is so exciting. Well, when I first launched Women's Entrepreneurship Day organization in 2013, I was horrified that only 1% of venture capital was going to female-founded startups. That next year, at our inaugural summit, we held it at the United Nations with 400 people in attendance. This year, we celebrated in 144 countries with over 500,000 participating worldwide, recognizing our movement to empower, celebrate, and support women entrepreneurs. And we know this number will increase and more women will be able to make their entrepreneurial dreams come true. Today, 7 years later, that percentage of venture capital going to female-founded startups has risen to 2.7%. This is still a pathetic number. We need to raise this. Women account for 85% of consumer purchases and control $20 trillion in worldwide spending. It's almost important to note also that women perform 66% of the world's work, and yet they only earn 10% of the world's income. Encouraging women to initiate startup ventures and supporting their work not only affirms individual women's hopes and dreams, it also drives economic expansion and advances communities across the globe. Choosing to support female-run businesses is a humanitarian decision that we can all make every day that impacts the world around us. Tonight, I so wish I was eating Thin Mints. Well, I'm not kidding about this, by the way. I am so looking forward to hearing from these phenomenal ladies on this panel. And now I'm thrilled and honored to introduce our moderator of this panel discussion, the incomparable Debbie Sterling, the founder and CEO of GoldieBlox. It's an award-winning children's multimedia company that challenges stereotypes with the world's first engineered character. Woohoo! Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you so much. My energy level just went through the roof after listening to you, Wendy. I'm honored to be here moderating today's conversation, and I'll start with just a brief introduction about myself. I'm an entrepreneur, and I was a Girl Scout. Once a Girl Scout, always a Girl Scout. And a quick little story about founding my company, GoldieBlox. I started it because I realized there were so few women in my engineering classes and I wanted to do something about it. And so I actually invented a toy in my living room. I called it the engineering toy for girls, and just off of my life savings, very humble beginnings, and took this toy to the big New York toy fair to try to get advice from the toy industry, and just got rejection after rejection. So, but I didn't give up. Put my toy up on Kickstarter, and all of a sudden in only 4 days raised over $250,000 to bring my dream to reality. And that was 9 years ago. And since then, GoldieBlox has raised millions of dollars from investors and reached millions of girls around the world with toys and entertainment. And it's just a joy every day to get to wake up every morning and be an entrepreneur and do this. But enough about me. We have some incredible panelists here today that I'm so excited to introduce and let them introduce themselves. So let's start with Arlan Hamilton, who is the founder and managing partner at Backstage Capital.
Hi, thank you so much, Debbie. That's a really cool story. I've known your story, but I didn't know quite that part of it, so that's really cool. I'm Arlan Hamilton. I'm the founder of a venture capital firm that invests in underrepresented founders, including women. It's called Backstage Capital. We've been in existence officially since 2015. Started it with $0, kind of a long story there, but in the last 5 years, we have invested in more than 150 companies that are led by underrepresented founders. 60% or so of those are led by women across the United States and elsewhere. And started it kind of the same reason. I was from a completely different industry, didn't even know what a venture capitalist was maybe 12 years ago, 10 years ago. But I noticed that there was a crazy disparity between the amount of money that was going to men and women in Silicon Valley and across the country into entrepreneurs, and it didn't make any sense to me. And so I set out on this journey of learning and educating myself, and eventually after a few years I said there's probably only one reasonable way for me to move forward, and that is to start my own fund and write my own checks. And that's what I did. So we've raised several $1 million since then, and like I said, more than 150 companies, and we are in at least 2 countries today, and that will expand over time. So I'm very, very happy to be here.
Thank you. Next up, I'm so excited to introduce one of my personal favorite female founders and personal favorite products that I eat way too much of, Natasha Case, who is the co-founder of Coolhaus Ice Cream.
Hi, thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot. I appreciate the support. Yeah, I'm the CEO and co-founder, Coolhaus Ice Cream. We are the leading women-founded and led, and also LGBTQ founded led ice cream brand that's nationally distributed. We're known for really unique flavors, innovative products. Some of our flavors like streetcar churro dough and chocolate molten cake, and then our new dairy-free line as well, which is made from peas, brown rice, and cocoa butter. So that's really exciting. Very inclusive brand. We're here to just bring the best ice cream to anyone who wants to eat it. We have more in the works, launching cones this year. We're super excited about. But yeah, I too, you'll find with entrepreneurship a common thread. Had a totally different background. I was trained as an architect, and I wanted to find a way to make architecture more fun and accessible. And I found that it just felt like a really intimidating field. So I decided to bring another passion of mine, which is food, into the conversation and merge design and food. And really, I think that took me to consumer packaged goods. And so much of what I do is about telling stories with the brand and thinking outside the box, including the way we launched with a postal van that had no engine that was masquerading as an ice cream truck at Coachella. We actually towed it out to the festival, and grew, first launched through trucks, and grew to have a scoop shop in LA, and now the grocery business. And just really important for me, I think, to lead by example, to show that women are obviously, we all know, completely capable of doing amazing things. In fact, do more with the capital they get, yet get less of it. And also to invest in the next generation of brands like you all who are with us today, and to be here to do partnerships and create a platform and mentorship and public speaking that can help inspire and hopefully just create a much more equal space for people who want to start their own brands and dream really big about it. So yeah, thank you again for having me, and excited to be amongst this amazing group.
Thanks, Natasha. And then last but certainly not least, I want to introduce Shelly Bell, the founder and CEO of Black Girl Ventures. Oh, Shelly, I think
today's modern day challenge, the mute button. Hi, I am so happy to be here. I'm Shelly Bell. I'm the founder of Black Girl Ventures. And what I love about Girl Scouts, they were asking us what's our Girl Scout story. And actually, before I launched Black Girl Ventures, I actually built a teepee in my living room, and I rented it out on Airbnb, and everybody thought I was crazy. Oh man, I was like, oh no, this teepee is gonna work. And through just like ingenuity and thinking of different ideas, landed on a print shop actually. When the news came out that Black women were not receiving access to capital, I said, okay, well, let's just do something about it. And so I pulled a bunch of women together. I started with 30 women in the house in Southeast DC. We threw money in a hat. We voted with marbles and coffee mugs. So 4 women got up to pitch, and we voted for our favorite one with marbles and coffee mugs. We gave the money out to them, to the winner, and I didn't think anything about it really, except people liked it. So I said, hey, let's keep doing this. And from there, we grew the largest rent party for entrepreneurs there is, which is coupling Shark Tank and Kickstarter, where women pitch and then the audience actually donates their capital. And then we launched it to 5 chapters across the country. We have a big presence in about 12 cities in the U.S. right now. But we've reached over 1 million people. We funded 130 women directly, and our founders, our alumni, currently represent $10 million in jobs. So it was definitely an idea that I felt, let's keep moving with it. And I felt like if we can do something, let's just do it. And then it steamrolled into what it is now.
amazing. Thank you, Shelly. Okay, so we are going to launch into some questions here. And as we're going through them, if anyone in the audience has any questions of their own, please submit, and we'll do questions from the audience at the end. But first, I'd love to start just on the topic of entrepreneurship and really discuss the state of women-owned startups. So much attention is paid to women's roles in major corporations. Every year, I think everybody knows, Forbes magazine lists the women who are CEOs in Fortune 500 companies, and many see that as a litmus test for how well American women are breaking through the glass ceiling. Right now, the number is 37 out of 500. And what's sad about that is that's the highest it's ever been. At the same time, in the startup world, slightly more than 20% of the venture capital-backed startups in America had a female founder involved in 2018, according to a Center for American Entrepreneurship study. So Arlan, I want to start with you. Based on that number, what is your take on how are women entrepreneurs doing today?
Yeah, these numbers, they don't match the demographics of the country. So if we're talking about the US right now, we're not there yet. There's been, I mean, to say the least, obviously, and it's the number is much lower when you talk about all female run companies. It's like less than 5%, or it's really, really, really stark. So we're not there yet. We shouldn't be complacent. We have to, keep fighting the fight. But I think it's much like, talking about other topics. I think it's undeniable at this point that something has to be done. I wish it would move faster. You know, I've been working on this for about a decade of my life. I'm now 40, and that number hasn't changed all that much, although a lot of traction has changed. You know, you've seen the IPOs, you've seen the bigger exits, or at least, you know, more than you saw in the past. But it is important to note that the number of engineers, the number of people getting being VCs who are women, that number has dipped. It actually was higher, and then it dipped, and now it's kind of coming back up like a roller coaster. So it's not the best, but I have hope and I have optimism, and I think that's the only way that I keep doing what I'm doing. And obviously, if you look at our portfolio, if you look at the women on this panel, the people who are in the audience, most likely, we know the talent is there, we know the opportunity is there, and you know, it's going to be a matter of investors trying to catch up to us and us letting them into our rounds eventually.
Okay, so question for the whole group here. A little more than 50% of American adults are women, but only 20% of the entrepreneurs are women. So any thoughts here on what are the forces at play in terms of inequity there?
Yeah, I think we're just, you know, coming to the place where we're saying girls could be anything, right? You know, we're only within what, a 5-year window of commercials that say girls can be anything. So, I mean, you know, it's when we think about who can be what, like what does an entrepreneur look like? You know, even, you know, if you travel around and you go into a classroom, you say, what does an entrepreneur look like? They're gonna think the first thing they say is Mark Zuckerberg, you know, Elon Musk. I think it's not even always about like who is the entrepreneur, it's who are we celebrating, who are we pushing forward as the entrepreneur, right? Because there is who is being an entrepreneur, but who is the entrepreneur. And then we start to use them as this kind of use cases, this pattern matching for who can be a thing, which is just not true, right? It's just not true. I think I love to hear the numbers on where we're not, but love to think about where we can be and considering the momentum around where women can be, where women are going to be. And I think when we go back and study the next batch of numbers, we're going to see a significant amount of change if we continue this momentum of like girls can be anything. We can do this, putting people up and, you know, propping people up into media, which is really doing a lot of the talking for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that those are such important points. And I want to add on, you know, I think there is a relationship with risk that I think can and needs to evolve. I think as women, you know, whether it's society or ourselves or however you view it, of, you know, holding to a certain standard where it's unacceptable to fail. Entrepreneurship is all about, you know, there's going to be many failures throughout, and you have to fail fast and you have to turn the other direction and keep going. And I think, you know, that's something that's, I think, really important to accept, and it's important to talk about that amongst other women and women to men, that that is part of the process. This is part of the journey. And that does go into the capital raise. You know, I mentor a lot of women. They don't want to accept any capital because of the fear that it won't go right. And they don't want to pay themselves anything until they've proved that it can get to a certain size. Meanwhile, I've mentored men, and they're out the gate paying themselves too much, and you have to say that's not going to work at first. You gotta, you know, so it's coming at it from such a different angle. So I think, and to me, so much of that is dialogue and open, transparent conversation. That is how we're, you know, learning to talk about these things, and knowing that no one person is on their own making mistakes. You know, it's a universal element of what it takes to grow a business, and you know, building a community who is doing that with you and supports you is going to be a huge part of getting there.
Now, something that I've personally experienced as a female founder is not being taken as seriously as male founders, and it's something I've battled with for years. And a question for the whole group here: what do you think is lost when women aren't taken as seriously as founders? And then a follow-on question: what are the impacts on society when we have fewer women-led startups?
Opportunity and money come to mind as things that are lost. I interviewed, I have a podcast called Your First Million, and I interviewed Katrina Lake from Stitch Fix, who's at the time was the youngest woman to IPO. I don't know if that's been beaten yet, but I hope so. And she said that for the first few years of her company, she couldn't raise much, maybe from angels, and also because of her size. You know, she's a smaller person, and so she was really not taken seriously. She was really kind of treated as a child almost. And you know, just imagine being that person sitting at that fund today or in 2017 when she IPO'd, and being that guy, because it was that guy who just dismissed her in that meeting, or in those 30 meetings that were dismissed, as she rings the bell with her baby on her hip. You know, imagine being that person. And so that she just represents so many people. And Backstage, my fund, we see thousands of companies a year, and so we see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women entrepreneurs. And it's almost like I have to remind myself that people even separate the two, or you know, across the board, because women, I mean, they're the majority of our portfolio. We bet on what we believe is going to do the best. It's going to make us the most money and have the best results. And the proof is in the numbers, you know. And that's not only the money we raise from other people, but it's my own capital. It's our partner's capital, and that's the bet we're making.
Now, Natasha, I'm curious if you had a similar experience that I've had being a female founder, not being taken as seriously, or anyone that you've mentored, and like, what do you do about it? What have you done?
I think I definitely remember, particularly early on, you know, also we started Coolhaus when we were 25. Freya and I, Freya's my co-founder and my now wife. She just went to go pick up our son from preschool. Otherwise, she could say hi. But a lot of like manufacturers, you know, vendors, et cetera, call us like the girls, you know, and it just always felt like they are calling, you know, like, oh, cute, you know. And I don't even know that I saw it as clearly then as I do now. You know, like, I think you hope you get older and time moves forward and things get better. I think I just feel more aware of, you know, the inequity, you know, with as a female founder. I think a lot of the problem is like, especially on the capital raise, you know, when you go into a room to, you know, look for that partnership, and it's like 15 guys and you know, there's going to be a disconnect, you know, and I love also, sometimes I would call it out, and I think that's important to do. And they'd say, oh, no, we have a woman in the office, like, she's, you know, an administrative person. It's like, that's not the point. The point is to really be able to, you know, to be equal in this world. You are a woman creator. You're looking for some other women to make that connection with. And I think, you know, it's now you just really have to position it as the value proposition. Like, if you're, for me in the ice cream business, you know, growing the Coolhaus brand, most ice cream consumers are women. You know, in that case, it's in this 60 to 70%. And you have still so few brands that are created and run by women. Of course, as a woman, you're going to have a little bit of a better sense. Okay, well, what is that consumer looking for? What are the important things to communicate on the packaging? What part of my story do we want to be told? You know, so I think you have to kind of turn it on its heels and say, not only is it not like, you know, or you're not being taken seriously, like, this is the idea to take seriously, because this is going to be a more authentic creation that can ultimately be more successful for everyone involved.
Shelly, I've got to ask if you have anything to add on this topic as well, because you mentor so many women, and I'm sure many of them have come across this challenge as well, and curious if you have any words of wisdom or advice when women are facing this, because we all face it, right?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was listening to the responses, and I was thinking about what would I say to this, because I do face it, and I think, you know, I remember raising capital, you know, for Black Girl Ventures, and you know, a male founder who I know has funded another organization just like ours that is male led, said to me like, oh, well, I'm not into diversity, so you know, I don't know, you know, what you want me to do with this. You know, what are you doing that's different? You know, like, the thing is, like, it's not even about, like, the other side of the effort is one thing, but just the way that you refer to even what we're doing, right? Or like refer to the fact that we would dare step into it, you know, or have the audacity to even consider doing a thing. That is the part that's so strange for me. And I have honestly, my answer is going to be a little bit more like a little bit more mushy, I guess. Have your support network outside of these folks, because you're going into these rooms. Make sure when you go home, you got some friend to call, you got some person that you could talk to kind of like keep you up and going. Your favorite music, your favorite, ratchet song, a gospel song, whatever you have to do to keep yourself up, to keep your mental self up, to keep your, your self-care time, whatever you do to keep it up. You have to find that space for yourself. Just don't give up, keep going even when people don't understand you. I've been told, like, I don't understand you. Your hair is, what does my hair have to do with understanding my efforts in my company? Right? Like, but we live in a society where we are taught to look at people and judge people aesthetically before we even listen to what they have to say. We are taught to, and that means being a woman, that means how you're dressed, that means what all these things that don't matter, your size, like Arlan mentioned, like these things that don't matter for you running a viable company that really solves a problem and can make money. So one of the things is like, oh, it's in the numbers. I actually push against the thought that there's numbers involved in this at levels, because all the numbers will tell you to invest in women. All the numbers will tell you to invest in diverse teams. All the numbers will tell you to invest in underrepresented founders. So the numbers are there. It's not about the numbers. It is now time for us to really address the elephant in the room, which is we just don't understand each other. History has it. I would say that history has it, so we don't understand each other. The problem started with historical challenges, and we just haven't been able to fix them. So, have your support group, have your phrases that you say internally, have your super girl stance before you walk in the room, and go in there and just keep pushing. I think we're all here because we just keep pushing. We're not going to stop pushing. And I look forward to the day that women don't have to have that message, right? That it's natural. And I'm a serial optimist, so I think it's coming.
Okay, so we've been talking about the numbers a little bit here. Let's go in specifically a little bit deeper into this funding gap, right? So as we talked about earlier, female-owned businesses receive 2.7% of all venture capital money. So what I want to ask the group here, what I know this number is abysmal, like, so what do we do? What do the founders need to do differently, if anything? And what do the investors need to do differently?
I don't know if the founders need to do much of anything differently except for not stop, not stop the momentum, not let this get them down to a point where there's no well to go to. One thing I know is that this industry is very slow moving and slow changing, and so that can mean a lot of bad things, but what it also means is that some of the effort and the sort of movement in the positive direction has already started and started years ago, and actually is showing itself little by little, and now I think you're going to see a lot more of that older effort that started. So what that means is, as an example, limited partners, LPs, are the investors who invest in funds. So the people that invest in funds like me, so I can invest in others. 5 years ago when I started, they were not looking for a fund like Backstage. They were not looking to fund people. Anyone on the screen would have been difficult for them to even have a meeting with, because it didn't register with them, or to tell their fund managers to have a meeting with. Starting 2018, when a lot of things happened in the world, that started to change. And so more and more, as every single, as time goes on and as things are proven out positively, there are more exits. There are numbers to look at that are undeniable. Unfortunately, you have to, same thing, you have to work so much harder to just be considered equal, but they're seeing that. You are now hearing calls from the LP networks, which are pretty insulated, saying to fund managers, no matter what their profile is, and mostly that's 90% white men, you're seeing calls to, I need to see more women in your portfolio for you to get my money the next time. And that speaks volumes to these investors, because that is what, at the end of the day, that's what they are most, that's what the majority of them are most concerned with, is how am I going to get paid? Where do I get my bills paid and to pay for my livelihood? And it's not so easy for a founder individually, or even a group of founders, to knock on the door of those funders and say, please give us money because we are worthy. We're going to make you rich in the future. But it really makes a lot of noise when an investor says to them, we're going to pull our money out of this if you don't do the things that we're asking you to do. And so part of that is that's changing. Another part is you have more and more women who are angel investors, and people are going directly to the crowd like you did, right, Debbie? Like going directly to the crowd. And did I call you Debbie? Is that your name? Did I say your name
Yes,
wrong?
yes, you
Okay.
call me Debbie. Yes.
Yeah, they're going and they're bypassing all these middlemen, right? They're saying, crowdfunding, not just Kickstarter, not just for perks, but for equity in your company or for future equity in your company. And that's where I think a lot of change is going to happen. So you have more people writing checks who look like us, who get us, who understand us, driving that. Then we get to enjoy these returns. And then you're going to have the guys with the FOMO, the fear of missing out. They're going to be like, whoa, okay, why wasn't I in that deal? At the same time, hearing from the purse strings saying, why weren't you in that deal?
Yep. Natasha, quick question for you. I know we GoldieBlox and Coolhaus, I know shares an investor. I know you've probably learned a lot over the years around raising capital. And I'm curious, like what is your take on why the numbers for female founders are so low, and what have you learned along the way that you would want to tell female founders, sort of the tips and tricks, if you will, on your ability to be successful in doing so?
Yeah, I think one element is definitely thinking really big and being very clear about that. Because I think, there's kind of, there's the running the business and having successes, but what does this all mean kind of even beyond that? And what is really the end game here? For example, the difference between, Coolhaus this year, about 15 million in revenue. Can we get to 30? Can we get to 40? But can we be the household brand of our generation? And really taking it to that level, and what that is going to mean for an investor, I think is really important. And I just think, and I love doing this, I'm really into kind of like, the visualization of it. I think it helps you hold yourself accountable, and it's something very clear to present to others. So making that 2, 5, 10 year, writing it all down. And I like writing in present tense because it's like really takes you into that moment, be as detailed as possible, and think about what your business can be at those moments. And also for yourself. I think also for women, we forget to factor ourselves into this. Are you going to be happy doing this, or are you going to be burnt out? Like, what's your role? What do you want to spend 90% of your day on that you can add the most value? That's also really important, because investors invest in people, and do they believe that you're there, like you're here on this earth, to have this purpose, to do this thing. I mean, that's a really big part of raising capital, and that's why when you have done it, then, your next business, it becomes a lot easier, I think, raising capital after one, because if you've succeeded, you have this great story, and it's about you and what you've brought to it. And then I also think something that was important for our investors is we're just very front and center with the female founded element. We had women owned certification. We put on the packaging. We talk about it a ton. And consumers don't know to demand it if they can't see it and it's not clear. And then they can't vote with their dollar. And then that money can't get back to the company / the investor. And then the investor can't want that more. So I just think if making that a part of not, like we were saying earlier, like not the obstacle, but like the value that you bring, because we see so much traction with having that front and center, is ultimately that does really help attract the interest, and the interest is growing, I think, as Arlan was saying, and people kind of making more demands about us. You definitely want to be one of those brands that folks can make that clear connection.
Yep. Okay, I want to spend a minute on diversity. And now I have the most depressing statistics of them all, I think. The number of Black female-founded startups has more than doubled since 2016, which is great. And funding raised by these startups has since increased 500%. However, the amount of funding received by Black women-led startups is still just 0.0006% of the 424.7 billion in total tech venture funding raised. So,
Yeah.
Shelly, I want to throw this to you because your organization supports Black women entrepreneurs. What more do you think can be done to support them to work toward equity?
So it's interesting that you said work toward equity, right? Because there is a study that recently came out by a company called Carta, and the study is called Table Stakes. And one of the things that I thought was surprising in reading, not surprising because I didn't know it, but I guess to just actually see it right there written in the study, is that they found that Black people actually get equity in startups later. They don't get equity in the beginning of startups being created. They also recognize that most of the jobs within startups that Black people hold are sales, customer service. So I think we have talked about a little bit about the venture capital challenge, right? And so I want to bring to light a different challenge, which is inside of startups, the ones that are IPO and the ones that are being built by, some of the white tech bros out there. They're still, Black people inside of these startups are holding the jobs that will not turn them into what would create generational wealth for them or their families, right? The people that do get the equity early on, they found were like, Asians. And why? Because early on, who do you hire? You hire engineers, right? And then you engineers at that level, you can work for equity. Well, as a person that's underrepresented, doesn't have generational wealth, the job that you need, you can't work for equity, right? So I think, thinking about like, how do we bake this in though? Like, how do we bake in the idea that if we hire Black and brown engineers up front from HBCUs, if we hire Black and brown people and give them equity in the beginning of this journey, that when you do IPO, you will now have created someone who can now become a funder and investor. So I think like the root of the problem is where we keep talking about the symptoms a lot. And I just really want to get down to the solves of like the root of this is we can do something different. And in order to do something different, even the startups that are that are owned by the people who would get funding a little bit more easily have to be thinking about what they do different from the beginning. And it's not just throwing big money at the problem. We've seen that with the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, who, as big as they are, can not solve diversity, it seems. Right. And so with that, if we think about this from the beginning, bake in diversity, which means a Black woman being able to work there, gain equity in the company, spin off her own company later. Like entrepreneurship has to be a part of the conversation now. It's not like a nice thing to do or like a thing we hope people do eventually. Or like, oh, that's great. No. Entrepreneurship is a mindset. It's a part of the ecosystem. And we all have some levels of ingenuity inside of us. So if this is a part of a job, it's a career. You should be able to go into entrepreneurship, go into a job, come back and be an entrepreneur, and it should be valued at the same level. So I think one of the things is, how do we value entrepreneurship? Who can be an entrepreneur? Another thing that people can do is your supply chain. So big corporations can start to hire Black women-owned companies as a part of your supply chain, and that helps increase. That's another level of customer, right? It's not just going B2C. It's not just them having to put together a really great marketing plan and try to go out and get everybody they can through technology. It is you saying, hey, let me look at, do I have women in my pipeline for my supplier diversity? And how can I do better with that?
Yeah, I think, Shelly, that's such a great point, because what you're really pointing to here is this isn't just a conversation about founder investor per se, but you have to look at really the whole picture, and there's so many different factors at play. Arlan, I want to ask what your thoughts are on this issue. I'm sure you have quite a few.
I think the very first thing that comes to mind is this idea, and this is why I started Backstage, and why the work that I'll do for the rest of my life will be centered around is just underrepresented today being the future tech titans of the world. So that means more and more of us starting companies. And yes, being able to dip into corporate world, dip out. That's where you kind of get your chops as learning as an early employee at a fast growing company. And you look at people like Mike Smith, who he was an executive at Stitch Fix. I think he was either the CFO or I think it was the CFO. And he's a Black man. He just, had life-changing capital in the last 3 years. And so it's like this, again, it's slow change, but you see it here and there. I also think going back to the media thing that Shelly's talking about, you're going to see art imitating life, and then life imitating art, and then so on and so forth. And so if you think about it, back in the day, just a few years ago, when the Social Network movie came out, right after that is when you start seeing this like influx of like guys in hoodies, white men in hoodies who are in their early 20s or wanted to be starting these companies from their garages. And that was this whole like this renaissance for them. And somebody asked me, I forgot when it was, probably 2017 or something like that. Somebody asked me, when will we see more Black women starting companies? And I said, when you see Beyonce say she's investing in them, or when you see her doing a music video about this or something like that. Right now you have Pharrell's put out a music video about it. Jay-Z's making all sorts of investments. We've co-invested in things together. You have people making it mainstream, making it more mainstream. So there are actually people who will never ever know who Mark Andreessen is, and maybe people here, and that's like music to my ears. Mark Zuckerberg, they may not know who these people are, who are considered who hold all this power in venture and in the startup space. Paul Graham, et cetera, et cetera. But they are going to know Jessica Matthews and Stephanie Lampkin and Jewel Burks. They're going to know them. And I think the day that that things start to get bonkers there in a good way is the day that I walk into my niece or nephew's bedroom and they have a poster of a founder, of a Black woman founder or a woman of color, the same way they would have a Rihanna poster or some sports poster up. And I do think we're headed that way. I really do, because there's more and more art imitating life as it is, and that means diversity. And then that will encourage and inspire others to continue that.
That's such a good point. Okay, so we've had some questions come in from the audience. So I'm gonna take a look here and pick one of these out here. Okay, so this is a question for everybody. I am planning to do my Gold Award by making a nonprofit. My goal is to educate high school students about the college admissions process. Any advice on starting a startup?
Ooh.
Yeah. You wanna take it, Arlan? I got some
I was
thoughts.
just thinking, I don't know if I can do this or not, but I'd love to give out some free passes to my online course about starting startups to this group, if we can arrange that later. So that's my contribution to it, because I go in for 15 hours about starting a startup. But I think that's a great idea, and there's some very fundamental things that you can do to do that, and you can do most of it online with very little money. Oh, and one thing I would say, if it's a nonprofit, I would say try to find a fiscal sponsor rather than starting your own nonprofit, because a nonprofit can take up to a year to just get started. So if you find a fiscal sponsor who already exists, there are websites that tell you about it. They can look at what you're doing and say, yes, we will take you on, and you can pass your capital through us.
I would say, well, things have changed a little bit, Arlen. So now it's a whole faster process, and you can do it online. It's
Oh,
crazy,
really?
but definitely seek out some legal advice, because we are not giving legal advice right now. But but yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
Shelly,
little
keep
bit.
me honest over here, Shelly, because the last time I tried it was still.
Yeah. So well, the first thing I would say is consider what you want to start up, right? Just try it first. I think that everybody thinks that the first thing you got to do is you got to jump out there, you got to go get a whole group of people, and and it's like, do you have a proof of concept? what can you do as a minimal viable product to create a really strong proof of concept that shows that this is a viable thing? Find a startup weekend if that near you and like participate in those because they are active. They get you really active in what it means to actually test out your idea. You know, you look at it like a science project, right? Like that is where you have a hypothesis. I think that people need this thing. Okay, cool. Who needs it? Go ask 20 of them, 30 of them, 50 of them if you can find them, if they actually need it, with a short 10-question survey. And then you will start to learn all kinds of things about what they actually do need versus what you think they need. And then you're gonna think about how you're gonna deliver it. So that's like really quick and short and to the point. But I think the first thing people think is that they need to go invest and raise and it's like, hey, do you even know if people really want this thing? And the two people you know that live in your neighborhood as your friends do not count. And your sister's grandfather's good cousin that never run a business before also does not count. All right. Revenue is a validation, and revenue for a nonprofit looks a little different, but still be thinking about a revenue generation model for a nonprofit.
That's interesting. Okay, I don't know if I'm allowed to give it advice as well, being a moderator, but I will anyway.
Good.
I think when you're starting anything, it's great to just do a bunch of research into this space. And what I did early on that was hugely helpful was I started reading books written by other founders with similar types of companies that I was wanting to build. So I read a book by the founder of Tom's Shoes, Blake McCoskey, because I knew I wanted to have a social enterprise, like a do-good company. And so I read his book, and that was very helpful.
Might I interest you in a fine book?
Ooh,
A person I know.
oh, wait a minute. Speaking of books, another great thing about being an entrepreneur, you got to know when to plug. No,
Always.
but I'm serious. Always plugging.
Yes.
Hey.
Yeah. Always be plugging.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Let's find. Oh, this is a great question. I'm not an engineer, so what if I have the ideas but not the engineering skills to create a demo?
Oh, that's not, I mean, I think, you're not going to be able to do everything that you want your business to do and be, from probably the get-go and all the way through. I think I feel it's a huge luxury at this stage I'm at. Like, I do have a team of experts around me, but it took a decade, to get there. And now I really do try to spend my time doing what I do best, the innovation, the, brand partnerships, marketing, still probably too many things if I actually think about it, but, I love it all. But, like for me, like when I started, I had the design background, so I could like make kind of like the branding, and I had some sales and marketing experience, and Freya really came from finance operations. She was in nonprofit real estate development. And so, we could divide and conquer. So I think it's good and okay to have a vision for something. If you don't have the core skill set, that may be a good reason to go and find someone where, maybe that is what they're bringing, and then you continue to grow on that org structure. And those are some of the best ways to co-found, one other, or, not maybe too many people. Keep the group small, but find those who will really be able to divide and conquer, but like you have a very aligned vision, and you can go from there. Well, I'll say, like, for me also, like, there's a misconception, oh, I have an ice cream brand, I'm a chef. Like, I'm not here to cook, really, to make cookies and ice cream. I like to do that in my free time, but like I knew immediately I want to get out of the kitchen. So that was a really important early hire, someone who can actually make the product, so similarly to this, like, that's okay. Like, you bring the vision and you go hire that skill set.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Arlan, there's a question specifically for you. It says, Arlan, you had a goal of investing in 100 founders by 2020. I've heard mixed advice on whether or not you're supposed to vision 5 years out. What is the wisdom on that?
Yeah, in my book, I say I have an entire section called "Write Your Own Headline," so I'm a big fan of it. I I say in the book too, when you vision without execution is just dreaming, right? It's just hope and a prayer. So it doesn't mean much to envision if you don't plan on doing anything about it. But I absolutely feel like it helps become your North Star. And for me, all I can do is talk about my experience. That's all I can pull from, to say what works and what doesn't for in my experience. In my experience, not only that goal of 2014, I was homeless and I had no money, and I wanted to start a venture capital fund. So to be standing in the parking lot of a hotel that I was sharing with my mom and pacing and saying out loud, I'm going to invest in 100 underrepresented founders by 2020, that was the kickstart that I needed. And I had to envision it, not just say it. I had to envision the world where that existed. And on top of that, I forced myself in that same kind of time period to envision the world where it didn't exist in 5 years or 6 years. And I said to myself, can you live with yourself if this does not exist in 5 years? And when I answer that question as a resounding no, it has to exist. It has to exist whether I get it there or not, whether I get part of the hype or not. I absolutely knew what direction to walk into. And so a lot of these, starting a company is difficult on its own, but maintaining a company and maintaining the multiple things that I do, especially across different companies, is very difficult. It's very rewarding, but it's a challenge. Everyone here on this panel knows that it's a challenge, and so you have to have that engine that is driving what you're doing, in my opinion. And so writing headlines, however you do it, if you have a vision board, if you just kind of say it out loud to yourself, whatever that means is, why not? And so I think maybe the people who are saying not to do that, maybe their reasoning is that you don't want to, have face disappointment if you don't get there. And that's okay. When I write my headlines, I still do it to this day and they still come true because I work towards it. But when I write them, they can change over time. That's okay. So it's a mixture of head in the clouds, feet on the ground.
Okay, here's another. I love this question for the whole group. How do we help our girls be risk takers?
Through art. I think that, art is a foundation of permission, in my opinion. When you can create, then you will own the permission to try things. So, I built that TP in my living room because I'm a performance poet and I've been on stages in front of thousands of people. And I'm like, if I can stand on stage in front of thousands of people, surely I could get a few people to sleep in a teepee, right? Now, is that crazy? Yeah, I just do not know why that was put together. But the permission, the permission, yeah, the permission to create, if we introduce that early, I think that we're inconsistently, just the permission to create something, whatever you dream of, down to like Arlan saying, creating her headlines and then envisioning, right? Like that's an art to that, right? There is what Natasha's talking about, her background was in marketing, when she had, architecture, there's an art in that, right? Like the permission, the thought that you can actually draw out plans for a building and somebody go build it. Like what? That's there's an art to that, right? So like this ability to see further and to take a risk, I think, comes from art creating the permission to create. And that's an internal thing that we start to own from the this from being a kid on up. Even when somebody tells you can't, like if you're the kid out there that paints your own shoes. I have a 6-year-old who can do a makeup like eye line better than I can, right? And I'm like, what? Who are you right now? Uh, she paints over her shoes. She, does all kinds of things to just create more things. She cuts up all of her shirts, which I'm over. But ultimately, you don't ever want to stifle that. So as you see women being your girls being creative in different ways, it may not look like what looks like traditional art at first. But when you see them, drawing, thinking out, pulling out in their engineering mindset, it's all art. So that gives you permission to create. So I would say give the girls more permission to create in the activities.
I'd like to add too, lead by example. Take risks yourself. You know, we're never too old to take risks. We're never too experienced to take risks. Show them that you did it. Show them, talk to them about your failures. Talk to them about things that didn't work out, but you're still here. And it's okay. People still care about you and you're still you. I think that is a major, major key.
I love
Yeah, and I
that.
think talking about it, like this panel is, this is awesome. We have a transparent conversation, we have an audience, and I think, like I said, I think, as women, there's sort of there's a double standard, and that we can't fail, and it's just an artificial creation, and talking about it pokes holes in it. And I think also just talking about money, there's this idea too that it's socially unacceptable, talking about money, talking about a value in a deal, talking about what you make. It's hard to know that you could go out and make more if you never have that conversation with your friends, and men talk about it and, oh, you're making that, oh, I can make this, and it's not, I think women, a lot of times what we think is bragging is just sharing, a story, like as men might view it, from what I've seen. So I think just, trying to think outside those conceptions, and then just the more the conversation we have about it, that is so key. It's unlocking a lot, just by talking about it.
Okay, I think we may have time for one, maybe two more questions here. Let's see, pull a good one. What are more positive aspects about being an entrepreneur in a COVID-19 world?
Ooh, positive. Oh,
Positive.
this is great. Thank you so much for asking it, whoever asked it, because I feel like we talk so much about the struggles that we forget the fun side. I mean, I don't take meetings until 10 o'clock. So I sleep in and I have my whole morning to do my own, like, slow wake up, crawl into whatever I want to do spiritual wise. I would say that I have an awesome team that I get to work with, and that's fun for me to say, hey, what are we going to do today? How are we going to solve these challenges for women in our community today? We have a massive following of folks, and so we actually are very interactive with our community. So I get to meet cool people all the time, like Natasha and Arlan, and we get to have like conversations about what we're working on. And speaking of what we're working on, Natasha and I are actually working on cooking up a nice awesome ice cream brand, ice cream flavor that will actually become a grant program for women founders. So, we get to have fun collaborations like that. I get to work with brands where I get to create content that educates our community, and that's fun for me. So for me, that in the spirit of writing a headline, I was like, what do I want to wake up and do every day? And I feel awesome that, like, going through the grind that I did go through to get here, I can wake up and do what I want to do every day and affect the community and make change in the world. And that feels super purposeful and makes me feel great. I get to spend more time with my children, even though virtual kindergarten is like kicking me right now. But but ultimately, I get to spend more time with my family on certain days, because some days is a grind. But I get to make a lot of choices.
Okay, we have one
Yeah,
minute left, so I'm going to just ask one final question. I think that's all we have time for. Role models are so important. We have so many people on the call right now who can start introducing some amazing female founders for their girls to learn more about and follow. So I just want to ask if any of you have can share with the group here some of your favorite young female entrepreneurs. And I know some have already been mentioned already, and feel free to repeat if you've said somebody before, but we could just kind of go around and call out an amazing female entrepreneur that everyone listening should know about.
I'm going to take the first round here because I do have to go. Sorry, I have a hard out at 5. Yalitza at Healthy Roots Dolls, I think, is an amazing person to talk about and to look up, because she's doing some really great things and kicking major butt in the toy space.
I'm one of her mentors, and I will second that one.
Yes, awesome.
Awesome. I would say Gabby at Gabby Bose. They came with a different kind of hair barrette, and they are now in Target. And her mom are co-founders. They're amazing.
Shira Gorin she's a friend of ours and someone that we've mentored a bit over the years, and she started an amazing company called Zygo, which is it's tech, and so I'm just glad to see women in tech growing this incredible it's hardware, so it basically allows you to either communicate with someone when they're underwater. They can do kind of a training program in the water or remotely, and there's a huge void in that space. And obviously now, speaking of advantages of COVID, the whole fitness industry has just been turned on its head, and it's a great time for her brand to take off. And I'm just really, really excited for her. I think it's a revolutionary idea. So that's the one I vote for.
Thank you. And I'll just do a shout out to a good friend of mine, Jess Ewing, who is the founder and CEO of Literati. It's an amazing subscription book club that I think has been really exploding. I'm excited for her. So I think this wraps up our panel. So I want to thank all of the panelists. This was an amazing and important conversation. I personally learned a lot and had a ton of takeaways. So thank you, and thanks to the audience here. I'm going to hand it back over to the Girl Scouts for closing remarks.
Thank you, everyone, so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us and invited the Girl Scout Network into your homes. We host a wide variety of campfire chats, so be sure to stay up to date with our offerings or watch recordings of past events on girlscouts.org/campfirechats. We're going to leave you with something sweet. The Girl Scout Cookie Program, the foundation of the entrepreneurial experience in Girl Scouts and the world's largest girl-led entrepreneurial program, is an exciting part of the Girl Scout experience. From finding, I'm trying to send the chat, I'm so sorry, is an exciting part. From goal setting to learning to sell safely online and delivering exceptional customer service, Girl Scouts prepare for a bright future as female business leader or entrepreneur. As cookie entrepreneurs gain essential skills, as girls working as a team to accomplish goals and solve problems while building the confidence they need to shine. You can support the Girl Scout Cookie Program by buying cookies at the link we are sharing in the chat log right now. In addition, as we mentioned earlier in the chat log, Girl Scouts launched new entrepreneurship badges for grades K through 12 last summer. Through this work, girls learn how to turn their ideas into viable businesses. For those who want more information, we'll share the link in our thank you email as well. And once again, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we look forward to welcoming you back at our next event.